One painful moment can reveal more about a narcissist than years of kindness. The person who shattered your confidence, walked away without regret, or acted as though your suffering meant nothing, may not be as emotionally untouched as they appeared. That cold smile, that calm silence, that complete lack of apology. Most people see those behaviors and reach one simple conclusion. They believe narcissists feel absolutely nothing after hurting someone. But modern psychology paints a far more complicated picture. Beneath the surface of confidence and control, there is often an emotional world that almost never becomes visible. It is hidden behind layers of defense, denial, and carefully protected self-image. The truth is far more unsettling than most people realize, because the emotions that follow their actions are rarely the emotions victims expect. Many survivors spend months or even years searching for one answer. Did they ever feel guilty? Did they lose sleep? Did they regret what they did? Or were those cruel words and painful actions completely meaningless to them? These questions can become emotional traps. They keep people connected to the person who hurt them long after the relationship has ended. The search for answers becomes a search for closure. Yet, the answers are often found in psychology rather than in the narcissist's own words. That is because many narcissists never openly admit what they truly experience inside. Their actions tell one story. Their inner emotional process often tells another. By the end of this video, you will understand why narcissists frequently appear calm after causing emotional pain. What may actually be happening beneath that calm exterior? Why guilt often looks very different in someone with narcissistic traits, and why understanding these hidden patterns can completely change the way you see your past experiences. You will also discover why many victims misinterpret silence, confidence, or indifference as emotional strength when those behaviors can actually serve as psychological protection. Some of the most important emotional processes happen where nobody can see them. One of the biggest misconceptions about narcissistic behavior is the belief that every hurtful action is carefully planned with the sole purpose of causing pain. While manipulation and intentional cruelty certainly exist, psychology suggests that many harmful behaviors also serve another purpose. They protect the narcissist from uncomfortable emotions that they struggle to face. This does not make the behavior acceptable. It does not reduce the damage experienced by the people around them, but it does help explain why certain patterns repeat so consistently across different relationships. This is where many discussions about narcissism become oversimplified. People often describe narcissists as monsters without feelings, or as people who enjoy hurting others every single time. Reality is usually more complex. Researchers who study personality disorders have long observed that beneath the appearance of superiority often exists something far more fragile. Many narcissistic individuals spend enormous amounts of emotional energy protecting an unstable sense of self-worth. They may appear confident, successful, powerful, or emotionally untouchable. Yet that outward image can function like armor. The stronger the armor appears, the more carefully it must be protected. That hidden vulnerability is one of the least understood parts of narcissistic psychology. Most people only notice the arrogance. They notice the need to win every argument. They notice the constant desire for admiration. They notice the refusal to accept blame. but they rarely stop to ask why those behaviors are so persistent. Forward. Psychology suggests that these behaviors are often defensive strategies. Instead of processing shame, fear, rejection, or insecurity in healthy ways, forward, the narcissistic mind may build defenses that keep those painful emotions out of conscious awareness. Forward. Those defenses can become so automatic that the individual no longer recognizes them as defenses at all. Forward. This explains something that confuses many survivors. A narcissist can hurt someone deeply and then continue with daily life as though nothing happened. From the outside, forward, it appears cold and heartless. Inside, however, the situation may be psychologically different. Rather than allowing themselves to experience vulnerability, forward, they may immediately shift blame, justify their behavior, minimize the harm, or convince themselves that the other person deserved the treatment. Forward. These mental strategies reduce emotional discomfort. They protect the carefully constructed image they have of themselves. Instead of asking, "Did I hurt someone?" Forward. The mind quietly changes the question into, "How do I protect myself from feeling like the bad person?" That small psychological shift changes everything. Forward. Many people believe remorse always looks the same. They expect sadness, confession, apology, and accountability. Forward. But emotional responses vary greatly depending on how a person's personality is organized. Forward. A narcissistic individual may experience emotional discomfort without allowing it to become genuine remorse. They may feel anger instead of guilt. Forward. They may feel shame instead of empathy. They may become defensive instead of reflective. To an outside observer, those emotions can appear identical to having no feelings at all. Forward. Yet they are driven by completely different psychological processes. There is another important truth that very few people discuss. Forward. Not every narcissist experiences these emotions in exactly the same way. Narcissism exists on a spectrum. Some individuals display only certain narcissistic traits, forward, while others meet the clinical criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. The intensity of empathy, emotional awareness, defensiveness, forward, and self-reflection can differ significantly from one person to another. That is why this video focuses on common psychological patterns rather than absolute rules. Forward. Human behavior is always more complicated than a single label. Forward. As this discussion unfolds, another hidden layer will become clear. Many of the behaviors that seem mysterious after a relationship ends suddenly begin to make sense. Forward. The silent treatment, the sudden confidence after an argument, the refusal to apologize, the need to rewrite history, the attempts to protect an image, even when evidence says otherwise. Forward. None of these reactions happen in isolation. They are connected by an internal psychological system that places self-protection above emotional honesty. Once you recognize that system, forward, many confusing experiences begin to fit together like pieces of a puzzle. This understanding is not about creating sympathy for abusive behavior. Forward. It is not about giving harmful people excuses or encouraging anyone to stay in unhealthy relationships. The purpose is much more powerful than that. Knowledge removes confusion. Forward. Confusion keeps people emotionally trapped. When you understand why certain behaviors happen, you stop blaming yourself for another person's choices. Forward. You stop searching endlessly for an apology that may never come. Forward. You begin to see that many of their actions were driven by their own psychological struggles rather than by your worth as a person. Forward. Some of the most important lessons in psychology are not about changing someone else. They are about finally understanding patterns that once seemed impossible to explain. Forward. That understanding can become the first real step towards emotional freedom. Today, forward, we are going beneath the surface to explore the hidden emotional world that narcissists rarely admit exists. The feelings they hide after causing pain, forward, and the psychological defenses that shape everything they do afterward. Welcome to Avoidant Psychology. Forward. If you enjoy deep psychological insights that help you understand complex human behavior and protect your emotional well-being, make sure to subscribe and join our community. Forward. Because the next part reveals what narcissists often feel in the moments immediately after they hurt someone. And it is far different from what most people believe. Forward. The moment after a narcissist hurts someone is often misunderstood. Most people expect one of two reactions. They expect deep guilt or complete emotional emptiness. Forward. Psychology suggests that in many cases, neither response tells the full story. One of the first emotions that may appear is not remorse at all. It is relief. Forward. That idea surprises many people because relief sounds completely out of place after causing another person pain. Yet when viewed through the lens of narcissistic psychology, forward, it begins to make sense. The hurtful words, the sudden rejection, the manipulation, or the emotional attack often accomplish something important for the narcissist. Forward. They temporarily remove an uncomfortable emotional pressure that had been building inside. For a brief period, the internal conflict becomes quieter. Forward. That temporary silence feels like relief, even though it comes at someone else's expense. This reaction is closely connected to one of the strongest psychological needs in narcissism. Forward. The need to stay in control. Control is not simply about controlling other people. It is also about controlling how the narcissist feels about themselves. Forward. Many people believe narcissists think they are perfect all the time. The reality is far more complex. Forward. Beneath the appearance of confidence often lies a self-image that depends heavily on constant protection. Criticism, rejection, disagreement, forward, or even small signs of disappointment can feel far more threatening than they appear on the surface. Instead of processing those emotions in a healthy way, forward, the narcissistic mind often searches for the fastest path back to emotional stability. Hurting another person can sometimes become that shortcut. Forward. This does not mean the narcissist always sits down and carefully plans every painful interaction. Many reactions happen automatically. Someone questions them. Forward. Someone challenges their behavior. Someone refuses to admire them. Within seconds, the mind begins defending itself. Anger rises. Defensiveness follows. Harsh words appear. Forward. The goal is no longer solving the disagreement. The goal becomes protecting the self-image. Once the other person is silenced, confused, intimidated, or emotionally overwhelmed, forward, the immediate threat feels smaller. The narcissist experiences a brief emotional release because the uncomfortable feeling has been pushed away instead of processed. Forward. One lesser-known fact from personality psychology is that emotional defenses can become so automatic that the person using them may not even recognize them. Forward. Defense mechanisms operate beneath conscious awareness. They are mental strategies designed to reduce emotional pain before it becomes overwhelming. In narcissistic personalities, forward, these defenses often become unusually strong because the underlying self-worth is so dependent on external validation. Rather than asking whether their actions were fair, forward, the mind asks a different question. How can this uncomfortable feeling disappear as quickly as possible? That silent shift changes everything that follows. Forward. One of the most common tools for creating that relief is blame shifting. Instead of accepting responsibility, responsibility is moved somewhere else. Forward. The other person becomes too sensitive, too demanding, too emotional, too difficult, too controlling, too selfish. Every label serves the same purpose. Forward. If the problem belongs to someone else, then the narcissist no longer has to face the possibility that they caused unnecessary harm. Forward. This reduces internal discomfort almost immediately. It creates psychological distance between their behavior and its emotional consequences. Forward. Blame shifting is not simply an excuse spoken out loud. It often becomes a story the narcissist genuinely believes. This is another detail that surprises many survivors. Forward. They expect deliberate deception at every step. While intentional manipulation certainly exists, repeated self-justification can become deeply convincing. Forward. The mind slowly edits reality until personal responsibility fades into the background. Each revision protects the fragile self-image from damage. Over time, forward, these revised memories become easier to believe than the original events themselves. Forward. This is also why genuine empathy often disappears during moments of conflict. Forward. Empathy requires the ability to step outside personal emotional needs and fully recognize another person's experience. That process demands vulnerability. It demands honesty. Forward. It requires accepting that one's own actions caused suffering. For someone whose entire psychological system is focused on defending the self, empathy becomes difficult to access. Forward. Self-protection takes priority. Instead of asking how deeply the other person is hurting, attention shifts toward explaining why the behavior was necessary, justified, or deserved. Forward. This process creates an important illusion. From the outside, the narcissist appears emotionally satisfied. They seem calm, confident, even victorious. Forward. Yet satisfaction and relief are not the same as peace. Relief comes from escaping discomfort. Satisfaction comes from believing a goal has been achieved. Forward. Peace comes from resolving conflict without denying reality. These emotional states may look similar on the surface, but psychologically they are very different. Forward. True emotional peace usually grows from accountability, honest reflection, and repaired relationships. Relief created through blame, denial, forward, or emotional domination follows a different path. It depends on keeping uncomfortable truths hidden. The moment those truths begin to return, the relief starts to weaken. Forward. The defended self-image must be protected again. New justifications become necessary. New conflicts emerge. New sources of validation are searched for. Forward. The emotional calm that seemed so strong begins to crack because it was built on avoidance rather than resolution. Forward. This explains why many narcissists repeat the same painful patterns across different relationships. The temporary relief works just well enough to keep the cycle alive, forward, but it never solves the deeper insecurity beneath it. Each conflict quiets the discomfort for a short time, yet the fragile foundation remains unchanged. Eventually, forward, another situation threatens the carefully protected image once again, and the entire psychological process begins all over from the beginning. Forward. The emotional aftermath of hurting someone is rarely as simple as it appears. Many people assume that a narcissist either feels overwhelming guilt or feels absolutely nothing. Forward. The truth is often far more complicated. One of the first emotions that may surface is neither remorse nor happiness. It is relief. That may sound shocking, forward, but psychology offers an important explanation. The act of hurting another person can temporarily remove an intense emotional burden that the narcissist was struggling to carry. Forward. For a brief moment, the pressure inside becomes quieter. The conflict that threatened their self-image seems to disappear. That emotional release can feel deeply rewarding, forward, even though it comes from causing someone else pain. To understand why this happens, it is important to look beneath the confident mask that narcissists often present to the world. Forward. Confidence is the image people see. Fragility is often the reality hidden underneath. This hidden weakness is rarely visible because it is protected at all costs. Forward. Many researchers describe narcissism as a personality style built around maintaining a grand image while avoiding painful feelings such as shame, rejection, failure, or inadequacy. Forward. Those emotions are experienced as serious threats. Instead of facing them directly, the mind quickly activates psychological defenses designed to make the discomfort disappear. Forward. This explains why even small disagreements can trigger reactions that seem completely out of proportion. A simple criticism, a boundary, a disagreement, a refusal to give attention. Forward. These moments may appear ordinary to most people, but to someone with strong narcissistic traits, they can feel like attacks on their identity. Forward. The emotional alarm inside becomes louder. The brain begins searching for a way to restore balance as quickly as possible. In many cases, forward, attacking the other person becomes that solution. Once the focus shifts away from their own vulnerability and onto someone else's supposed flaws, forward, the emotional pressure immediately decreases. Forward. This process happens surprisingly fast. Many psychologists believe these defensive reactions become so automatic that the person may not even recognize what is happening inside. Forward. They simply feel angry. They feel justified. They feel convinced that the other person is the problem. Forward. The emotional relief arrives almost instantly because their fragile self-image no longer feels under attack. Forward. It is similar to placing a heavy object on someone else's shoulders instead of carrying it yourself. The weight disappears from one place, but it has not disappeared altogether. Forward. It has merely been transferred. One lesser-known fact about narcissistic defenses is that they often protect against shame more than guilt. Although these emotions sound similar, forward, psychology separates them in an important way. Guilt focuses on behavior. It says, I did something wrong. Shame focuses on identity. It says, there is something wrong with me. Forward. For many narcissistic individuals, experiencing shame feels unbearable because it threatens the carefully constructed image they depend on. Rather than risking that painful experience, forward, the mind quickly changes the story. Someone else becomes responsible. Someone else becomes unfair. Someone else becomes impossible to please. Forward. This shift protects identity while avoiding emotional collapse. Blame shifting plays a central role in this process. It is much more than making excuses during an argument. Forward. It becomes a psychological shield. Every accusation directed outward reduces emotional discomfort inside. The narcissist tells themselves that they were forced into the situation. Forward. That the other person deserved the treatment. That no reasonable person would have reacted differently. Forward. These explanations are repeated so often that they can eventually feel completely true. This is why many narcissists appear genuinely convinced that they are the victim, forward, even after causing obvious emotional harm, forward. For the person who has been hurt, this can feel deeply confusing. They wait for understanding. They hope for compassion. They expect the narcissist to recognize the damage. Instead, they are met with denial, defensiveness, or complete indifference. That response often creates another painful question. Did any of it matter to them at all? The answer is more complicated than it first appears. Their attention is focused so intensely on protecting themselves that the emotional experience of the other person becomes pushed into the background. Self-preservation replaces reflection. Empathy suffers because empathy requires emotional openness. It requires the ability to tolerate discomfort long enough to acknowledge another person's pain. That process demands honesty with oneself. It demands accepting responsibility without immediately defending against it. For someone whose psychological survival depends on maintaining an ideal image, this kind of openness feels dangerous. Instead of asking how deeply someone else has been hurt, the mind begins collecting reasons why the behavior was necessary, understandable, or even deserved. Self-justification becomes stronger than compassion. At this stage, many observers mistake emotional relief for genuine happiness. They see confidence. They see calmness. They see someone moving on with life as though nothing important happened. But relief, satisfaction, and peace are three very different emotional states. Relief comes from escaping immediate discomfort. Satisfaction comes from believing a goal has been achieved. Peace comes from resolving conflict honestly without denying reality. A narcissist may experience relief after winning an argument or hurting someone emotionally, but relief built on denial is extremely fragile. That temporary calm depends on keeping uncomfortable truths buried beneath layers of psychological defense. As long as those defenses remain intact, the narcissist can continue believing the story that protects their self-image. But reality has a way of returning. Another disagreement appears. Another relationship begins to crack. Another challenge threatens the image they work so hard to maintain. The relief that once felt powerful starts fading because it never addressed the deeper insecurity beneath it. The emotional pressure slowly builds again, searching for another escape, and that hidden cycle becomes the foundation for everything that happens next. The emotional relief that follows a hurtful act rarely stays for long. As the immediate tension begins to fade, something much less visible often starts to rise beneath the surface. It is not always guilt. In many cases, it is shame. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of narcissistic psychology because shame is rarely expressed openly. It hides behind confidence, sarcasm, anger, or complete emotional distance. The outside appearance remains controlled, but internally there may be an ongoing struggle that few people ever witness. This hidden emotional conflict helps explain why narcissists work so hard to protect the image they present to the world. Most people think confidence means security. In narcissism, confidence can sometimes function more like a shield than a reflection of inner strength. Researchers who study narcissistic personality patterns have found that many individuals with strong narcissistic traits rely heavily on external admiration to maintain a stable sense of self. Praise, attention, success, and recognition become emotional fuel. Without those sources, the carefully built image begins to feel unstable. That instability is deeply uncomfortable. So the mind quickly searches for ways to cover it before anyone notices. This is why criticism often feels far more painful to a narcissist than it appears. A small disagreement that another person could forget within minutes may continue echoing inside the narcissistic mind. A comment that questions their intelligence, appearance, success, or character can trigger emotional reactions that seem completely out of proportion. The issue is rarely the criticism itself. The deeper fear is that the criticism might contain some truth. That possibility threatens the identity they have spent years constructing. Shame plays a powerful role in this process. Unlike guilt, which focuses on a specific action, shame attacks the entire sense of self. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame whispers something much darker. It suggests, I am the mistake. For someone whose self-worth already feels fragile beneath the surface, that emotional experience can become almost unbearable. Instead of allowing shame to be processed, the mind begins building barriers against it. Those barriers become psychological defenses that protect the person from confronting painful emotions directly. One lesser-known fact is that these defenses often operate so automatically that the narcissist may sincerely believe the version of reality they create. Many people assume every denial is a deliberate lie. Sometimes it is. But psychology also shows that repeated self-protection can gradually reshape memory and perception. Events become rewritten. Conversations become distorted. Personal responsibility fades while the flaws of others become magnified. This is not always a carefully planned deception. It can become a deeply rooted way of preserving emotional survival. Another hidden feeling that often exists beneath the surface is the fear of rejection. This fear is rarely obvious because narcissists usually appear independent and emotionally untouchable. Yet many experts believe that beneath grandiosity often lies an intense sensitivity to being abandoned, ignored, or exposed. These fears frequently begin much earlier in life, shaped by environments where acceptance depended on achievement, appearance, performance, or meeting impossible expectations. Over time, the mind learns that vulnerability is dangerous because vulnerability creates the possibility of emotional pain. This helps explain why emotional closeness can become strangely uncomfortable for narcissistic individuals. Real intimacy requires honesty. It requires allowing another person to see imperfections, fears, and weaknesses. For someone whose identity depends on appearing exceptional, flawless, or superior, this level of openness feels risky. Every emotional connection becomes a situation where hidden insecurities could be discovered. Instead of lowering the walls, many narcissists strengthen them. They choose distance over openness. They choose control over trust. They choose admiration over genuine connection. That hidden insecurity often transforms into behavior that appears completely opposite. Instead of admitting uncertainty, they become overly confident. Instead of acknowledging fear, they become intimidating. Instead of expressing emotional pain, they criticize someone else. Superiority becomes a disguise. Arrogance becomes emotional armor. Every display of dominance pushes attention away from the vulnerable parts they desperately want to hide. This is why many survivors feel confused after witnessing dramatic changes in behavior. A narcissist who once seemed charming and affectionate can suddenly become cold, dismissive, or hostile after feeling challenged. The shift seems sudden, but psychologically it has been building beneath the surface. The threat to their self-image activates the same protective system again. Their priority is no longer preserving the relationship. Their priority becomes preserving the identity they believe keeps them emotionally safe. Forward. Admitting guilt becomes especially difficult because guilt carries consequences that reach far beyond saying two simple words. Forward. Accepting responsibility means admitting that the carefully protected image is incomplete. It means acknowledging flaws that the narcissistic mind has worked tirelessly to deny. Forward. That admission feels like opening a door they have spent years trying to keep locked. Behind that door waits shame, insecurity, rejection, and the fear of no longer being admired. Forward. From their perspective, avoiding guilt may feel emotionally safer than facing everything hidden behind it. Forward. This creates an important distinction that many people overlook. Feeling shame is not the same as accepting responsibility. Shame often turns attention inward. Forward. Focusing on protecting the self from emotional pain. Responsibility turns attention outward, recognizing the impact of one's actions on another person. Forward. A narcissist may experience moments of internal discomfort, embarrassment, or even emotional collapse without ever developing genuine accountability. Forward. The emotional energy remains focused on repairing their damaged self-image rather than repairing the relationship they harmed. Because of this, even when shame quietly surfaces, it rarely stays visible for long. The mind quickly begins searching for another defense. Excuses return, blame returns, anger returns. The fragile image is rebuilt once again, layer by layer. From the outside, it appears as though nothing happened. Inside, however, the battle between insecurity and self-protection continues, shaping the choices they make and setting the stage for one of the most puzzling behaviors of all, their remarkable ability to avoid apologizing even when the damage is impossible to deny. One of the biggest turning points in any relationship with a narcissist does not happen during an argument. It does not happen when harsh words are exchanged or when someone finally walks away. The real shift often begins when the emotional reactions stop. The tears become less frequent. The long explanations disappear. The desperate attempts to be understood slowly fade away. The constant need for their approval begins to lose its power. From the outside, this change may seem quiet. Inside the narcissistic dynamic, however, it can create an unexpected psychological disturbance. Many people assume that narcissists only seek attention because they enjoy admiration. While admiration is certainly important, there is another need that receives much less attention. Validation. Validation reassures the narcissistic mind that it still matters, still has influence, and still occupies an important place in another person's emotional world. Positive attention provides one form of validation. Negative attention can provide another. Anger, pleading, arguing, chasing, defending, and repeatedly trying to explain feelings all communicate one hidden message. They show that the narcissist still has emotional power over the other person. This is why emotional reactions often become part of the relationship pattern. Every emotional response confirms that the connection still exists. Even painful interactions can reinforce the narcissist's sense of importance. The relationship may become unhealthy, but the emotional attachment remains active. As long as another person's thoughts, decisions, or emotional state continue revolving around them, the narcissist receives evidence that their influence has not disappeared. Then something changes. The person who once responded to every message becomes quiet. The arguments stop. The emotional explanations end. There are no dramatic confrontations. No attempts to convince, no visible desperation. Instead, there is emotional distance. This shift often creates a form of uncertainty that many narcissists find deeply uncomfortable. Suddenly, one of their most reliable sources of validation becomes unavailable. One lesser-known principle in psychology is that people often become more focused on something when predictable feedback disappears. This pattern has been observed in many areas of human behavior. The brain naturally seeks closure when expected responses suddenly vanish. A narcissistic individual who has grown accustomed to receiving emotional reactions may begin wondering why those reactions no longer appear. The silence interrupts the familiar psychological pattern. This uncertainty can become surprisingly powerful because control depends on predictability. When someone reacts exactly as expected, the narcissist feels confident about the relationship dynamic. They know which words trigger guilt. They know which behaviors create anxiety. They know how to regain attention after conflict. Emotional independence removes that certainty. Without predictable responses, their usual strategies lose effectiveness. For many survivors, silence is simply a step toward healing. They are focusing on rebuilding their own emotional stability. They are protecting their peace. Yet, from the narcissist's perspective, the silence may be interpreted very differently. Instead of seeing healthy boundaries, they may experience confusion, frustration, or even a sense of losing influence. The familiar emotional mirror they depended on no longer reflects the image they expect to see. This does not automatically mean the narcissist suddenly develops deep empathy or genuine regret. The emotional reaction is often centered on the loss of control rather than the loss of the relationship itself. That distinction is extremely important because it explains behaviors that otherwise seem contradictory. A narcissist who ignored someone for weeks may suddenly become interested once emotional distance appears. A person who seemed completely indifferent may unexpectedly send a message, ask mutual friends questions, or create opportunities for unexpected contact. These indirect behaviors often confuse the other person. They wonder whether the narcissist finally understands the damage they caused. They hope that the renewed attention signals personal growth or emotional awakening. Sometimes genuine reflection is possible, but in many cases the motivation is more complex. The unexpected silence creates uncertainty. Uncertainty threatens the narcissist's sense of influence. Reestablishing contact becomes a way of testing whether that influence still exists. The methods used to regain attention are not always obvious. Some narcissists return with unexpected kindness. Others create situations that invite sympathy. Some become unusually nostalgic. Others may post carefully chosen messages, achievements, or emotional statements designed to attract curiosity. They may contact mutual acquaintances, mention shared memories, or behave as though nothing ever happened. Each action carries the same underlying question. Does this person still respond to me emotionally? Another surprising fact is that emotional distance can sometimes increase a narcissist's focus more than emotional conflict ever did. During the relationship, they could predict the emotional cycle. After emotional independence appears, that certainty disappears. The lack of information creates psychological tension. Human beings naturally seek answers when patterns suddenly change. Narcissistic personalities are not immune to this tendency. In fact, Because so much of their confidence depends on external feedback, the disappearance of that feedback may become especially difficult to ignore. Forward. This is also where many people confuse being missed with being valued. Those two experiences are not always the same. Missing someone can mean longing for genuine connection, forward, shared experiences, trust, and emotional closeness. Missing emotional control is different. It focuses on the absence of influence rather than the absence of intimacy. Forward. The relationship becomes important because it supported the narcissist's self-image, not necessarily because it provided mutual emotional security. Forward. Understanding this difference protects many survivors from returning to unhealthy patterns. Renewed attention does not automatically mean renewed respect. Forward. Curiosity does not always equal accountability. Persistent contact does not necessarily reflect emotional growth. The real question is not whether the narcissist reaches out again. Forward. The more important question is whether the underlying pattern has changed. When emotional independence becomes stronger, the entire relationship dynamic begins to shift. Forward. Decisions are no longer driven by fear of losing approval. Boundaries become easier to maintain. Emotional reactions become calmer. Forward. Validation starts coming from within rather than from another person's changing behavior. For someone accustomed to influencing emotions through conflict, guilt, or attention, forward, this transformation can be deeply unsettling because it removes the very foundation on which the old dynamic depended. Forward. Revealing a cycle that many narcissists continue repeating for years without ever fully escaping. When people think about narcissistic behavior, they often focus on individual moments. Forward. A cruel comment, a broken promise, a sudden disappearance, a painful betrayal. Yet the most revealing part of narcissism is not found in a single event. Forward. It is found in the pattern that repeats over months, years, and sometimes an entire lifetime. Many narcissists move from one relationship to another, believing the next person, forward, the next success, or the next source of admiration will finally give them the lasting satisfaction they have been chasing. For a short time, forward, it often feels as though they have found it. Then, slowly and almost invisibly, the same emotional cycle begins again. Forward. At the center of this cycle is something that rarely disappears completely. Unresolved shame. It does not always appear as sadness or self-criticism. In fact, forward, it usually hides beneath confidence, achievement, or emotional distance. The person may look successful. They may receive admiration. Forward. They may appear completely unaffected by the relationships they have left behind. Yet hidden emotional wounds do not disappear simply because they are ignored. Forward. Psychology has repeatedly shown that avoided emotions tend to influence behavior from the background, even when they are never openly acknowledged. Forward. One lesser-known fact about emotional avoidance is that the brain often mistakes escape for healing. The immediate discomfort fades, so it feels as though the problem has been solved. Forward. In reality, the underlying emotional wound remains untouched. This creates a dangerous illusion. Every new relationship, every new achievement, forward. Every new source of attention provides temporary relief. But none of them address the deeper insecurity that continues shaping future behavior. Forward. This helps explain why similar relationship patterns appear again and again. At first, everything feels exciting. The narcissist may seem deeply interested, attentive, forward, and emotionally invested. The new relationship provides admiration, validation, and hope. It temporarily strengthens the fragile self-image beneath the surface. For a while, forward, emotional stability seems restored. But relationships naturally become more complex over time. Disagreements happen. Expectations increase. Boundaries appear. Forward. Real intimacy requires vulnerability. Those same hidden insecurities that existed before slowly begin resurfacing. Instead of examining those painful emotions, forward, the familiar defenses return. Blame replaces reflection. Anger replaces vulnerability. Distance replaces honest communication. Forward. The relationship begins following the same path as the ones before it. To an outside observer, each failed relationship may appear unrelated. From a psychological perspective, forward, they are often connected by the same unresolved emotional struggles. Forward. This repeating pattern is one reason why many narcissists continue searching for external validation throughout their lives. Compliments feel reassuring. Success feels reassuring. Forward. Attention feels reassuring. Admiration feels reassuring. Yet these experiences rarely create lasting emotional security because they come from outside the individual. Forward. The moment the praise fades, the internal uncertainty quietly returns. The self-image must once again be reinforced through new achievements, new relationships, forward, or new sources of admiration. Researchers sometimes describe this process as an unstable form of self-esteem. Forward. It appears strong when external support is available, but becomes vulnerable when that support disappears. This creates constant emotional dependence on the opinions, attention, forward, or approval of others. Even people who appear completely self-confident may secretly rely on outside validation far more than anyone realizes. Forward. This constant search often produces temporary victories. Winning an argument feels satisfying. Gaining admiration feels rewarding. Receiving attention feels exciting. Forward. Finding a new relationship creates hope. Each success delivers a short burst of emotional relief. Yet the feeling slowly fades because the deeper emotional need remains unresolved. Forward. The next victory becomes necessary, then another, then another. Satisfaction becomes temporary because it is built upon unstable foundations. Forward. One surprising detail is that many narcissists genuinely believe each new beginning will be different. They may blame previous partners. They may believe circumstances were unfair. Forward. They may convince themselves that the next relationship will finally provide everything they have been missing. Since the internal emotional patterns remain unchanged, however, forward, the same difficulties gradually return. Without self-reflection, different people often become participants in the same repeating story. Forward. Emotional avoidance plays a major role in keeping this cycle alive. Growth requires facing uncomfortable truths. Forward. It requires acknowledging mistakes without immediately defending against them. It requires tolerating shame long enough for it to transform into accountability rather than denial. Forward. These steps are emotionally difficult for anyone. For someone whose identity depends heavily on protecting a flawless image, they may feel almost unbearable. Forward. This is why genuine psychological growth is so challenging. Growth asks a person to lower the defenses that once made them feel safe. Forward. It asks them to recognize that protecting the ego is not the same as protecting emotional well-being. It asks them to replace control with honesty, superiority with humility, forward, and blame with responsibility. Those changes require sustained self-awareness and, in many cases, professional therapeutic support. Without that work, forward, the familiar defenses continue directing behavior almost automatically. The difference between accountability and avoidance becomes clearer over time. Forward. Accountability often feels painful at first because it requires accepting uncomfortable truths. Yet that temporary discomfort creates lasting freedom. Relationships become healthier. Trust becomes possible. Emotional stability grows from within rather than depending on constant praise or admiration. Avoidance follows the opposite path. It protects the ego in the moment, but quietly strengthens the very wounds it is trying to hide. The emotional burden never truly disappears. It simply waits beneath the surface until another conflict, another rejection, or another challenge awakens it once again. For the people who have been hurt by a narcissist, understanding this long-term cycle changes an important perspective. It becomes easier to see that the repeated patterns were never created by a lack of worth in the victim. They were driven by emotional struggles the narcissist carried from one situation to the next without resolving. That realization does not erase the pain, but it removes one of the heaviest burdens survivors often carry, the false belief that they could somehow have loved, sacrificed, or explained enough to break a cycle that the narcissist themselves was unwilling to confront. The greatest lesson in all of this is not that narcissists feel nothing. It is that many of them experience emotions that are far more complicated than they allow anyone to see. Relief instead of remorse. Shame instead of accountability. Fear hidden behind confidence. Insecurity disguised as superiority. These emotions may exist beneath the surface, but they often remain buried under powerful psychological defenses. As long as those defenses stay in place, genuine empathy and lasting change become extremely difficult. This is why understanding narcissistic psychology is so important. It gives answers to questions that can keep people emotionally trapped for years. It explains why apologies may never come. It explains why blame is so common. It explains why some narcissists repeat the same relationship patterns over and over again. Most importantly, it reminds you that another person's inability to face their own emotional wounds is not proof that you were unworthy of love, respect, or kindness. One hidden truth that many survivors discover much later is that healing begins the moment they stop measuring their value through the reactions of the person who hurt them. The search for validation slowly loses its power. The need for one final explanation begins to fade. The silence that once felt painful becomes peaceful. Boundaries become stronger. Confidence grows from within instead of depending on someone else's approval. That is where real freedom begins. There will always be people who protect their image more fiercely than they protect the hearts of those around them. There will always be people who choose excuses instead of honesty and control instead of connection. You cannot force someone to become self-aware. You cannot heal wounds that another person refuses to acknowledge. But you can choose a different path for yourself. Focus your energy on your own recovery. Protect your peace. Build relationships where respect is mutual, trust is earned, and accountability is welcomed instead of avoided. Those choices create the emotional security that manipulation never can. If this video helped you see these patterns more clearly, please leave a like and subscribe to Avoidant Psychology. Every new video is created to help you understand complex human behavior and strengthen your emotional well-being. Share your thoughts in the comments as well. Your experience may help someone else realize that they are not alone in their journey. In the end, the most important question is not whether a narcissist secretly understands the pain they caused. The most important question is whether you finally understand your own worth. Because healing truly begins when you stop trying to understand their excuses and start recognizing your own value.